Hello, future challengers, or current challengers looking for ways to improve. This is the second in a series of videos about how to succeed in the CounterSide Ranked Gauntlet PvP mode. Last time, we covered game settings, and now we're ready to tackle something tougher, building an effective Ranked Gauntlet team. To try to keep this video from becoming too long, we'll be talking mostly about units and equipment basics this time, with just a brief mention of ships and operators at the end. We'll be focusing on counter teams, because most people prioritize getting good counter gear first to clear PvE content. I'll be dividing this video into chapters, so you can easily find the sections you're interested in without having to rewatch the entire video. By the end of this video, you should have everything you need to make a good team. Well, I mean aside from the gear and the characters themselves. Hopefully you've got that part figured out. So, the standard Gauntlet team is going to consist of frontline units, like defenders and strikers, to absorb damage, healers and supporters, to keep your frontline alive, power up your team, backline damage dealers, to kill your opponent's frontline, and disruptors to interfere with your opponent's strategy. Not every successful team needs to fill all 4 roles, but this is a good starting point, and you can make it all the way to Challenger in the same way that I have, while using this 4 corners team building approach. Once you get comfortable with making teams like this, you can start thinking outside the box for your Gauntlet team compositions, and we can discuss those teams in future videos. So, with the 4 corners Gauntlet team, you could theoretically just run 2 of each role and have yourself a usable team. Below Diamond League though, I think you'll have an easier time running 2 or 3 frontliners, depending on if you're running an Awakened Defender or not, 1 or 2 healers or supporters, 3 damage dealers, and 1 disruptor. The team I'm showcasing from last week is kind of funny, because technically I'm only running 1 frontliner, and I've kind of mashed around Laura and Spear together into a second one, even though they're more of disruptors. I have 3 damage dealers, and Awaken Amy as my main disruptor. Now, this isn't really the kind of team I intend for you to build after watching this video, but if we pretend that Spira and Laura's cat are frontliners, then it kinda works. I was able to climb a bit with this team, despite only playing around a dozen rounds last week, so hey, you can't argue with results. But yeah, for a more relevant example, let's take a look at what I built for this week. Once, this whole screen goes away. Pay attention to the average cost of your team, and try to avoid building a team with an average cost of 4 or more, unless you know what you're doing. Making them too cheap might not be a good idea either, because if you can't quickly break through your opponent's front line, and they have a high cost team, you might eventually just get overpowered, even if it looked like you were going to win at the beginning. An average cost of somewhere around 3.5 is probably a good target. You want to be able to cycle through your units, so you can play any of them fairly quickly, regardless of your draw order, and hopefully be ready to redeploy your main frontliner when they die for the first time. Whoever you choose as leader will always cost 1 fewer deployment resource to deploy, unless they're banned for that week. So, to get the most out of the bonus, it's a good idea to lead with somebody who you expect to send out multiple times in one battle. Normally, you'll want your team leader to be a strong frontliner. If they're a rearmed unit, then you can make use of their leader skill as a bonus, but setting an Awakened Defender as a frontliner is also a good option, especially in lower leagues where people are less likely to have reliable and well-geared frontline killers. Choose somebody tanky, or otherwise essential to your team strategy, so that you're guaranteed to draw them first, and be ready to send them out as soon as you need them. Frontliners, for our purposes, are mostly just damage sponges. It's a good idea to diversify your frontline by using at least 1 tanky striker, and 1 tanky defender, so that your opponent won't be able to just roll over your whole team with a single well-geared sniper, or ranger. You can even have 1 of each on the field at the same time to split the damage between them and give your supports more time to heal them up, but you should normally avoid avoid deploying them one right after another. Some good striker options for this role are Einstein Zwei, Rearmed Orca, Rearmed Esther Rosa, and Awakened Ju Shiyun. For defenders, your main options are Awakened Hilda, Awakened Jake, Rearmed Casey Binns, Horizon, Serapal, and the Yumi. Leviathanus and Rearmed Alex are probably coming to Global in the next month or two, and they are also excellent options. Rafaela Jury is technically a tower at the start, but she's arguably one of the toughest units to kill. She just can't walk for the first 15 seconds after her deployment, unless she gets pretty damaged. If you don't have any other defender options, Administration Shieldman can also be used. Likewise, Chinatsu is okay as a striker if you already have her raised up anyway, but neither of these can really compete with the other options on this list. Your front line is probably going to cost around 10 deployment resources in total, so you might want to think about running 3 frontliners if you're using units with a lower deployment cost. In terms of gear, you want your frontliners to be heavily focused on defensive stats, like anti-ground damage res, melee damage res, and ranged damage res. The more, the better. Optimally, you'll want an inhibitor weapon with anti-counter damage res on option 1 and anti-ground damage res on option 2, ideally with melee or ranged damage res as its potential. You want a maze case with crit damage res on option 2, and either Gordias with anti-ground damage res option 2, or inhibitor movement accessories that have ranged or melee damage res potentials, anti-counter damage res on option 1, and anti-ground damage res on option 2. HP set bonuses are almost always the best option, while defense and evasion sets are usually fillers, and attack speed or cooldown reduction sets are for very specific use cases or strategies. But having good anti-ground damage res on options is much more important than any set bonuses. Stack that shit to the moon. I'll explain why in a future video. Just having high anti-ground damage res on every piece of gear is going to make your front line so much harder to kill, even if you can't get the specific pieces or potentials that I've mentioned above. Just so you know, inhibitor weapons are the only ones that are able to roll anti-ground damage res on option 2. The dedicated healers are Evelyn, Claudia, and Carmen. Rearmed Shinatsu exists on the KR servers and is reportedly amazing, so she is one to look out for when she arrives. For our team, just pick the one which isn't banned that week, or whichever one is least banned, as I have done here. You may want to use 2 healers if you run an Awakened Defender, a Rearmed Frontliner, or Awakened Ju Shiyun, and want to keep them alive for the whole match. Just be super careful about using them when facing off against Awakened Seo Yun, since her special skills debuff causes your heals to damage your team instead. The mixed healers / buffers are Yang Harim, Awakened Shinjo, Arius, and regular Chinatsu. These are more niche, but they can be very powerful in the right team, so keep an open mind. We'll talk more about them in a future video. And yes, I will be saying that a lot here. There are some other units which are technically in the supporter class, but the only thing they support is the suffering and destruction of your enemies, so we'll be talking about them in the later sections instead. Healers and buffers are mostly going to have the same gear. Cooldown reduction sets with either haste or anti-ground res option 2, depending on your priorities and which options show up on your gear before you run out of tuning binaries again. Healer and support gear is a lot less important than frontline and damage dealer gear, so whatever haste and resist stats you can get on them will be good enough until you have most of your other gear figured out. Damage dealers fall into 2 main categories. The most important one are what I call tank busters. These are the units meant to clear your opponent's front line, so you can push into their back line and destroy their ship. With the standard Four Corners team, whichever player can kill the other's front line first is almost always going to win the match. So it's extremely important to have a tank-busting sniper to deal with enemy strikers, and probably 2 tank-busting rangers to deal with enemy defenders, which are usually tougher to kill. If you're able to get good mech gear for her, Ifrit is great at killing both defenders and strikers, but you should probably focus on gearing her to deal with one or the other, and not both at the same time, depending on what your team's needs are. Sniper tank busters include rearmed Shaolin and regular Shaolin in lower leagues, rearmed Mia, Ludmilla, and Grendel. Rita can also fill this role, despite being classified as a supporter. Ranger tank busters include Administration Rifleman, Gaeon, rearmed Hansorim, Rosaria, Liuri, and rearmed Rivet once she arrives in Global. The other group of damage dealers we'll call casters. They're a bit more niche, and focus on dealing area damage with their skills, usually hitting enemy rangers and supporters behind the front line too, and often providing other benefits, like stuns or debuffs. Gaeon and Rosaria can be geared to focus on being casters instead of tank busters, and along with them, there's Ministra, Lucercia, Awakened Seo Yun, Replacer Queen, and Awakened Regina when she comes to Global. Tank-busting rangers should ideally be equipped with Spectral Blaze, or attack speed sets, with options 1 and 2 providing anti-ground damage and anti-defender damage. Like with Frontliners above, having the right options is much more important than having the right set bonuses, so focus on getting the right options first. Tank-busting snipers usually have high base damage, and strikers have less armor and health than defenders, so as long as you have high anti-ground damage as one of the options on your equipment, you can often get away with giving them skill haste sets, attack sets, or even crit damage sets for Crestal and regular Shaolin. Anti-striker damage is, of course, also a good option. Grendel and anti-striker Ifrit builds should aim for maze attack speed or spectral blaze sets with anti-striker damage and anti-ground damage options. Casters should ideally be using skill haste sets with skill haste options, and antagonist set pieces can be good placeholders while you try to get skill haste on your maze pieces. Challengers' hands, if you can get your hands on them, can also be a good option for units with powerful specials. Now, Lily's more of a disruptor than a caster, but her special specifically targets the backline and deals decent damage if you give her the right equipment. Disruptors are units which disrupt your opponent's strategy, often by stopping their back line from doing their job, by either distracting, disabling, or just killing them. I can probably make entire videos dedicated to each disruptor unit, talking about their equipment options, how and when to use them, etc. So I'll be brief here and just reference gear sets from previous sections for your sake and mine. Played at the right time, a disruptor can completely change the tide of battle, but the wrong one, deployed at the wrong time, can be a total waste of deployment resources, accomplish nothing, and lose you the match. So play them thoughtfully, and don't add too many to a single team. Gremory, tank set, and Lily, caster set, are used mainly to sleep your opponent's back line. They're usually safe picks when they're not banned, but remember that you can't put mechs to sleep, and that Kim Hana's and Olive's operator skills block sleep while they're active. Harab can mind control all 2 deploy cost units or lower, as well as summoned units, for 10 seconds after they're hit by her special, unless they're immune to confusion. The 2 cost limit is affected by bans and ups, but not the leader deployment cost reduction. Kang, rearmed Kang, rearmed Elizabeth, Ingrid, and Awakened Yumina are usually played as backline assassins, or distractors. Ingrid and Yumina should be geared defensively. Rearmed Elizabeth should be geared offensively with type bonuses against backline units, and can be equipped with either one. Amy First Wing, caster set, strikes terror into the hearts of snipers, rangers, and supporters, because she pulls them to her from half the field away when she is deployed. Yes, really. And silences them. She deals pretty good damage, too. Rearmed Eugen snipes your opponent's backline ground units while hanging out behind your own backline, like the coward she is. She's a Fury type who recharges her skills with basic attacks instead of a cooldown, so her gear should be focused mainly on attack speed, followed by ground damage and range damage, and finally anti-damage against rangers, snipers, and supporters. Spira, tank set, starts as a striker frontliner, but after taking some damage she becomes a midline distractor and then a ship assassin. She takes a lot of pressure off your front line with her passive effects and tankiness, which I'd argue makes her almost interchangeable with a striker frontliner. But you probably won't be able to keep her safe as she charges into the middle of your opponent's team, so make the most of the time she gives you. Rearmed Laura, support set, is probably the most subtle disruptor who provides some frontline in the form of a resummonable perfect evasion cat, and powerful attack speed and offensive stat reduction to slow down some frontliners' ability to keep themselves alive, and backliners' ability to damage your frontline, especially if you set her as the leader. There are a handful of units I'm skipping because this video is long enough already without my hot takes in it. Maybe next time. So, likely the best ships to use for the teams that you'll be building from following this guide will be the Lake Superior, Kamizumi, Gleipnir Armor type, Gleipnir Pod type, and the Enterprise, in no particular order, except the Enterprise probably being the worst. The New Ohio and New Detroit are also good options, but they're more niche, so review their skills and make sure they suit your team's strategy first. Shout out to the Blue Ridge Mark II, which is an amazing ship if you play ranked as a new player, but starts to fall off by Platinum League, unless you run it with some specific team compositions, which I haven't covered here. The best starting operator is going to be Kim Hana. Her skill is easy to activate to get value from even at level 1. She's good in PvP and PvE, so if you get one with a great passive like anti-ground damage res or anti-area damage reduction, you can safely invest in her. Other great choices include Sigma, Olive Park, and Serena Crew. Sigma and Olive Park benefit a lot from duplicates to level up their skill, while Serena Crew is another one you can get immediate value of at level 1 when you really need to remove buffs from your opponents. Stay tuned for future videos breaking down PvP ships and operators in greater detail. I'll also talk about bans and ups, but for now just try to avoid running banned units, unless you have a very specific reason for doing so. And only run up units if you already have them leveled up and skilled up, or wanted to level them up anyway and were just looking for an excuse. That should be everything you need to build a strong counter team. You can ask for feedback and ideas for improving your PvP team on the CounterSide Global subreddit, or the Global Discord's PvP channel, which has helped me get a better understanding of some of the units I've talked about here. I'll have links to both in the description. Check out my other videos in this guide series for a more detailed overview of the things which I had to gloss over, and once I post them. And get subscribed if you want to be notified when I release new ones. If you found this video to be helpful, please give it a like and help the channel grow. What rank Gauntlet subject would you like me to tackle next? Hopefully it'll be something a little simpler. Let me know in the comments below.